everyone. It's that time of week again. For those of you joining us live, it's Hump Day, and man, what a week so far. At least for me, John. This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. See, I'm already stumbling on the name of the show. I'm Anthony Cosenza, and it's great to have everybody with us. Great to have you back, John. We had a fill-in host, and he did a great job. Cody Toomey, you know him. But we missed you nevertheless, my friend. You were sipping some margaritas and Coronas down Mexico way. So how was your trip?
A lot of shots, a lot of forgotten memories, and one temporary tattoo. That's a sea paw. I got it before my beloved Bearcats blew a 13-point first-half lead to the Iowa Hawkeyes in the first round of the NCAA tournament. Not an event that was too unpredictable if you follow UC Bearcats basketball, but if that was the low point of the trip, it was a very good trip regardless. Yeah, I'm glad to be back, though.
Is that truly temporary? Because I feel as if you showed that on Twitter about a week ago, and those things kind of peel off, especially if you're in the sun, if you're in the beach, if you're at the pool. I don't know, man.
The random dude on the beach said it would come off in 3 weeks, and I gave him $10 and just kind of went with it. So okay. We'll find out. We'll find out in a week or two. If it's
all right. Well, we'll check in with that on next episode. That could be a segment all in itself. Next episode. Good Lord, my friend. Well, hey, school pride. I like it. And city pride, I guess. Yeah, I like it.
Wish I could have chosen a better school at basketball.
Well, hey, they made the tournament. You know what? It's Cincinnati sports teams. What else can you expect? But it's great to have you back, man. We had a good episode last week, but we definitely missed you, and we've got a jam-packed one this week. My apologies to everybody for those who are watching us live. My apologies for starting late. That is my fault. I have had a number of things come up today, and yeah, so no excuses. Play like a champion, but still my fault for being a little late. On this week's episode, we're going to talk about the Darqueze Dennard signing and what that means for the Bengals and just how big of a signing that is for the team. We're going to talk about some recent comments on Andy Dalton, very interesting comments on Andy Dalton by the head coach, Zach Taylor, and owner Mike Brown, what that means for the team going forward, and some other rumors tied into that. We're also going to have a little fun, and it's not going to be the cleanest game, but it's going to be a fun game in terms of, we're talking basketball, so it's going to be a little Bengals/draft Sweet 16, and we're going to go through a bracket quickly and kind of reign a champion there. I think we know where that might go, but still, we're going to have a little fun with it. And then we're going to take, if we have time, we're going to take some listener questions. So get those to us on Twitter at BengalsOBI. Leave them in the comment section on CincyJungle.com. Leave them in the live YouTube chat. We're going to be scouring all those areas to try and get to some of those at the end of the show. You can also call or text us 949-542-6241. We'll be taking texts throughout the show, calls at the end of it. So get in touch with us how you can. And as always, you can get this show on iTunes, on Stitcher, on Google Play. We're on Spotify, and all of our stuff's on CincyJungle.com. It's on YouTube and the Megaphone platform. So get the show, subscribe, and hey, do us a favor. Tell a fellow Bengals fan that may not be listening to this show, tell them about it. And if you like the show, like what we're doing, tell them about it and tell them to subscribe and maybe tune in live with you. That being said, John, the Bengals made what I think a lot of people thought was a very unexpected move in re-signing Darqueze Dennard. There were some initial negotiations. It sounded as if Darqueze Dennard was kind of in the $8 million, $9 million, $10 million a year range is what rumors had. The Bengals said thanks, but no thanks. And he went to test the market. That didn't really work out for him, and now he is on a one-year deal. I believe I read it was in the, what was it, $5
million?
Yeah, I was going to say $5 million, 5.5 million, something like that. So, and that's a pretty steep pay cut from the last year of his rookie deal. I think that was about $3 million or so. That was a pay cut from what he made in 2018. So all around, a very interesting, very unexpected sequence of events, but the Bengals have their quote-unquote slot corner back. your general thoughts about that move, and were you surprised? I don't see how you couldn't have been, but were you surprised about it?
I was, because of the timing of it all, because I think that they felt that Dennard was going to go in a different direction as soon as free agency began, and they couldn't find a deal, because we all assumed that he would get a multi-year contract in the range of the $8 to $9 million range, because that's how the market was trending at that point. And usually when you have guys who are going to make that much money on the open market, they typically don't come back to their own team. So if he were to come back, it makes sense it was on a deal much lower than he was expecting to get compared to the market. And especially when they've already signed what most of us thought was his replacement, B.W. Webb. That's 3 starting cornerback contracts on the roster, and then you bring back Dennard. So that room is now crowded, and it's not a bad thing, because you can never have too many good corners. But that shocked me a little bit. Obviously, he didn't find the money that he was looking for in the open market. I think I only saw him go to Kansas City in talks with them. There might have been other teams interested as well. But as soon as I saw like the numbers and the monetary value on the contract, I immediately went to our Slack channel, and our editor Jason Markham was already on it. Like, we're paying Bobby Hart more than we're paying Darqueze Dennard for the 2019 season. Which, if you had told me that in January, I would have lost my mind, because it was so dumbfounding to hear. But yeah, it's good to have a solid player in Dennard back. Obviously, looking at his career, you wish that they would have developed him a lot better, because he only saw the field remotely in any capacity in like his 3rd year, and that probably stunted him more so than what he could have been at this point in his career. So, but I think he's about what you would expect him to be based off the player that he was coming out of Michigan State. And good for him to kind of bet on himself to maybe get a little bit more money, because he's still, I think, only 27, 28 years old. So he still has some time to get another decent deal. And obviously the market's always going to go up, especially for a position that's as valuable as slot corner. I'm just interested to seeing how this all kind of plays out with the guys that they have, because you would assume Jackson keeps his spot. Kirkpatrick, for the time being, keeps his spot. Then you have Webb coming in Lou Anarumo's defense. He did succeed as a slot corner in the time that he played there last year when and Anarumo was there. So you would assume that he would have come in and started there, but then Dennard's back, and you're thinking, okay, he's going to take a spot back. Where does that leave Webb? Where does that leave Kirkpatrick? There's a lot of questions for me personally there, but it's safe to say the cornerback room is taken care of. No need to really spend a draft pick there, and you have your 6 or 7 guys you'd like competing for training camp.
So I mean, I look at it. We talk about maybe he overvalued himself. Only once in 5 seasons has he ever played a full 16 games. 3 interceptions over 5 seasons, 17 passes defended in 5 seasons, 3 forced fumbles, 1 recovery, and 3 sacks. Known as a good tackler, known as a physical guy. There's been, like I said, there's been some health issues. There's been some statistical issues. And I think maybe he just kind of pushed his chips in the middle of the table, and he kind of lost a hand, I guess, if you want to use gambling analogies. I mean, I just and I don't know that other teams really made a bad decision by not saying, yeah, we gotta pay this guy a lot of money based on some of the stuff we've seen with him, the track record we've seen with him. Not a bad player. I think he kind of said, hey, and there has been some steady improvement over the past couple of years. Like you mentioned, more snaps and a couple of more big plays, but injured a little bit last year. I think he said, I'm a former first-round pick, and, this is a cornerback greedy league position that gets paid well, and he kind of bet on himself there. Now, to Dennard's credit, he's kind of saying the right thing since he's been there. He said this is going to be an elite cornerback group. He's excited to be back with the Bengals, even though it's for 1 year. Chances are, like you said, it's going to probably be either or Kirkpatrick or Dennard when 2020 rolls around. I don't know that it's going to be both. I think the end game, regardless, is to extend William Jackson. I think he's going to be, that's kind of their guy. But at least for 2019, like you said, they've got 4 corners they can roll out there that, they can make some plays. And there were a couple of young guys at the end of last year. I think Darius Phillips had some nice moments. And so they've got some depth there. And God forbid, if there is a big injury to one of those, top 3 guys, top 4 guys, there's a lot of depth there. Where I want to go next, though, is why I really like this signing for the Bengals, aside from the value of it. The division is in a very weird place right now. It's very topsy-turvy in terms of, all of a sudden now everybody thinks the Browns are going to, and rightfully so, they think they're going to rule the roost and take over control of the division because of the moves they have made over the past basically 2 off seasons, maybe 3 off seasons. And there are a lot of good ones. Baltimore, who knows what's kind of happening there. Pittsburgh lost 2 big stars on offense. But the point I'm trying to make here, John, and I want to get your perspective, Pittsburgh's probably going to draft a wide receiver at a relatively high spot this year because of the loss of Antonio Brown. Baltimore always kind of collects B and C receivers. I would expect them to probably do more of that, especially a speedy guy. And then you've got Cleveland making the big trade for OBJ, along with Callaway, along with Jarvis Landry, along with a lot of talented pass catchers on those teams. Those teams also employ talented tight ends. My point is this a very underrated key to a successful run within the division for the Bengals because of the 4 seemingly good to at least capable cornerbacks to cover a lot of these weapons that they're going to see 6 times this year?
Well, I did say when the Browns traded for OBJ that Darqueze Dennard's not going to make much of a difference there.
Right.
Because, he's OBJ. It's just like if the Ravens brought back Tavon Young and it's like he's going to stop AJ Green. Like, we know that's not true. It's kind of like this, like a similar situation for me. But again, it never hurts to add or retain good players, and having more good corners is better than having less good corners, I guess, in a sense. My whole thing is just you look at BW Webb's contract, and for most teams, you wouldn't really you could just glance over. It's 3 years, $10.5 million, and it could be starter, could be backup money. But at this point, the Bengals have 4 corners who are getting paid decent money that are capable of playing significant snaps. And yeah, you have a flux in Pittsburgh with Juju potentially rising up as that number 1 receiver. You have now a solid group in Cleveland with OBJ leading the team. So you're going to have, obviously dangerous options in that division facing up against the slot, and they're just going to be very valuable with that. And I think in terms of just the divisional impact, I look at the Ravens offense specifically and how they want to win. They want to pound the ball with Lamar Jackson and run that read option. Dennard played pretty well against the Ravens in the one game that he played against them, or in the one game that Lamar Jackson started against them, and just kind of being that force defender in the slot. And that's kind of where his value is like a downhill run defender. And that's where he's always going to win more so than in coverage, while Webb is more of the fluid cover guy. So you have Webb maybe playing on the weak side in your dime formations, and Dennard playing the strong side, be more of a forceful run defender. So I like how this cornerback group kind of has a balance of what guys do well and what guys do better in some other areas. And you have Dennard be that physical force setter in the slot to defend, either Lamar Jackson read option, or you have maybe that diverse Browns running game as well. And obviously the Steelers are always going to have some type of answer on offense. So yeah, bringing back Dennard obviously bodes well defending this division, whose offenses are largely up in the air. You have to assume that Cleveland's passing game is obviously going to improve. Pittsburgh is obviously very questionable right now, and you have to assume that Lamar Jackson's going to gradually improve as he gets older. So bringing back Dennard definitely helps out their case and trying to salvage their 32nd ranked defense.
Yeah, the run game is an interesting point because Dennard is known as a sound tackler.
Right.
Not necessarily the preeminent trait you look for in a corner, but it is up there, and that's he'll get his nose in there on a couple of occasions and make some plays. And I think also what those teams will do, especially the Browns with who they have at wide receiver, they will mix up who's in the slot, and they'll kind of mix and match a little bit. So the Bengals have kind of some similar flexibility, I guess,
right,
in terms of how to match coverages there. I want to ask you this, because Cody and I talked about this last week, but this signing hadn't happened yet. There was some talk, hey, maybe Greedy Williams, hey, maybe corner's going to be that. This pretty much takes that, I would think, off the table, correct? I mean,
I don't know, man. It's the Bengals. It's a first-round cornerback. Nah, it's not. It's not. It's not even years. So you table it.
Yeah. I don't. I think they're probably looking day 3 to add someone there. And then we did talk about this though last week, and I just want to get your perspective. Really, the Bengals at this point re-signed, I think now 5 or 6 of their own key free agents. Really only brought in 2 outside guys. One guy is slated to be a starter in terms of Williams at the guard spot. Are you pleased with this? Do you see any kind of viable improvement, or is this kind of just more treading water for the team? I mean, there's going to be more probably after the draft in terms of some scrap heap signings, rental deals at positions they maybe didn't get to address as well as they would like in the draft. But I don't know. I mean, the Dennard brings a little more excitement to the free agency period, but all in all, are you enamored with it, or are you kind of saying, well, this is still the same team that won 6 games last year?
The phrase that I always use with the Bengals in terms of their improvements is just baby steps. And I think a signing like John Miller, it's baby steps. BW Webb, baby steps.
Yeah, I said Williams.
Oh, yeah. But yeah, like I look at the names, just strictly the names that the Bengals have signed, and I'm thinking this is a solid free agency period compared to their standards. You're thinking, maybe like 1 at most 2 external guys, typically on 1-year deals, typically towards the middle or the end of their careers when they're not at their best. But you have a guy like Miller who's a clear upgrade at right guard. Even if he's not the greatest right guard ever, he's going to bring some form of stability, which they just haven't had. But with the offensive line, again, like bringing in Cordy Glenn, it was a small step in the right direction, but it wasn't enough. Miller replacing Alex Redmond at that spot, it's an upgrade, but it's not enough because they still have a hole at right tackle, which they decided that isn't the hole because they paid the guy $16.5 million. So I just look at the names, and I think the names are fine because all these guys, in some capacity, I wanted them to bring back. The numbers on some of the contracts, we already talked about Hart and Brown. That's the most mind-boggling thing to me, and it kind of counteracts the positive moves in terms of bringing in BW Webb and John Miller. Even Webb got a little bit more than he probably should have gotten on the open market because he never even had any, I don't think he's ever had a multi-year contract to his name. He's been on like 6 teams in 5 years, and this like puts his career earnings and like maximized by like 90% based on what he already had. So like you never think about like the Bengals overpaying for other players that aren't their own. Webb is, I guess, the biggest like thing when it comes to that, but even so, that's like $3 million paying for this year. So compared to their standards, it's a lot, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not a lot. So it's a lot of just things, positives and negatives counteracting each other all at once in this free agency period. And I guess compared to the realistic expectations that we should have had, we can kind of just tip our hats and say, all right, at least they didn't completely shoot themselves to the foot. They kind of salvaged it with a couple of things.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to need to get some immediate impact guys in the draft. They haven't done that in the past, and the past couple of years in this high round. So they're going to need to do a better job this year of that. And, that'll potentially add to the free agency. But really, a lot of familiar faces and a lot of guys. I mean, kudos to them. They brought back a lot of guys that they had targeted in terms of internal guys, I guess. But what they're betting on, I talked about this last week with Cody, is they are making a very risky bet on health. They think they've got the talent, and they just need the health, not have the injury bug. And we'll see if they can stay away from that. But Darqueze Dennard is back on a 1-year deal. Obviously, a thing where he's betting on himself for a year, and whether that he parlays that into a better deal next year for the Cincinnati Bengals, or if it's for another team, that's obviously his plan of attack going forward. This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. He's John Sheeran. I'm Anthony Cosenza. You can get this show on iTunes, on Stitcher, on Google Play, on Spotify, on the Megaphone platform. You can also get it on YouTube and Cincy Jungle. So subscribe to our channels. Get it how you can. We appreciate you tuning in live and getting this show after the fact. Please try and join us live, though, if you're able to. We usually record Wednesday evenings, and we'd love to have you and get your questions on the air.
So while I was away, I did miss being on Twitter. I did.
Did you really miss it, though? I mean,
no, it's a lie. But the one time I had Wi-Fi on the ship is when I actually saw like the tweet of Burfict getting released, So that was the one like piece of news that I actually saw like live. But I did miss a few Bengals personalities on Twitter. One of them was Kat Terrell. I think she has incredible savvy when it comes to like just asking questions and stuff. And she definitely showed that in recent days because she asked Zach Taylor at the league's annual meeting in Phoenix, Arizona this year, the question about the first round pick. And in years past, at least in the years that Terrell's been here, the common answer with the first round pick from Marvin Lewis has always been everything's on the table except for quarterback. And that was specifically something they said in 2017 when they passed on Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Watson. So in Terrell's fashion, she said, is every position on the table besides quarterback this year? And Taylor said, everything's on the table. And he didn't mention besides quarterback because Zach Taylor is not Marvin Lewis and he's not tied to Andy Dalton. So that was kind of a positive, bright spot that we kind of got this past week. And then we had a quote from Mike Brown saying that Andy Dalton is not up for an extension this year. He's got 2 years left on his deal, but this is kind of the year that he needs to prove himself to come back with everybody healthy. And then we'll talk about an extension next year, which in just a vacuum is kind of weird how an average quarterback would possibly get an extension in this quarterback market when he's not proven himself worthy of getting that money, especially with 2 years left on his deal when none of them is guaranteed. So it's kind of this weird dichotomy of comments with the quarterback situation because at the same time you have, rumors going around about, we're committed to Andy. We're seeing what he's going to be able to do. Everything's on the table. If that includes quarterbacks, we have Zach Taylor going to pro days in Oklahoma and Ohio State, checking out Kyler Murray and Dwayne Haskins. I guess only Haskins is likely to be available at this point there, but it's kind of weird how we're seeing, Zach Taylor and Mike Brown talk about Andy Dalton in this new era of Bengals football, because obviously Taylor will eventually try to find that new guy. But Anthony, what do you think this says about not only the confidence of Andy Dalton, but just like the long-term future of the Bengals quarterback right now?
I think, and as the draft nears, I think that I think Zach Taylor wants to have his guy to come in here and put his stamp on things. I think ideally everyone's, and by the way, I'm not a tank guy. I mean, I don't want to sit here and watch a 2-win season, and especially for you and I that have to cover a team like that and try and make interesting stories and interesting podcasts. Sorry, I'm not into a 2 or 3 win season. That's not me, and I don't want to see. These are professional athletes getting paid a lot of money. When you strip a team of talent and/or you see teams just not putting forth the effort and they're making a lot of money, to me, that's just a waste. I'll get off my soapbox now, but I do understand that there are better quarterbacks potentially than what we think we see this year, coming next year, and Tua, coming the year after that, and Trevor Lawrence. I get it, but I also think that coaches now, and granted the Bengals have longer leashes with their coaches than probably a lot of other teams in the league, but coaches do have short leashes in the NFL today. And if they are not doing well within a year, 2 years in the Zach Taylor era, and he does not have he has not selected a quarterback, I don't know that he will have felt as if he gave himself a fair shot because he didn't get the guy that he thinks can run his offense. So I think everybody knows my opinion. If I'm just sitting out here based on these comments, based on what Zach Taylor said when he first came in as the team's head coach about Andy Dalton, my thing is Zach Taylor probably has the opinion of most Bengals fans, which is, yeah, Andy Dalton's pretty good. We give him a lot of talent. He's got some offensive line help. He can do a lot of things. But I also think Zach Taylor that's not my hand-picked guy. That's not a transcendent talent at the position. And, I would not be surprised if number 11 is a quarterback. I would not be surprised if the Bengals in the top 2 or 3 rounds, if they package some of those 5th round, 6th round picks and move up or back into a round for a quarterback, especially if one starts to slide. So I don't want to sit here and say, oh, Andy Dalton's going to be benched by the time Week 8 rolls around in 2019. I think Andy Dalton, we've seen, has a very good rapport with A.J. Green when he's healthy. He has an excellent rapport with Tyler Eifert, especially in the red zone when they're both healthy. You got Joe Mixon coming off of one. So he's got a lot of those weapons. He's got a lot of surrounding talent, which was the key to a very good year by him in 2015. But these comments obviously make it seem like either, we're looking at somebody at 11. We may have our eyes on Josh Rosen, though it's reported that they aren't one of the teams supposedly interested at this point. Or we are going to look at a quarterback, but it will be in 2020, and 2019 is a prove-it year for Andy Dalton if he's going to take the next step in his career. But I think by now, we're 8 years into this thing. We should know. And there are people that are vehement about get rid of him, and the other way, keep him, and get the talent. But I think we know. I think we've got a very large sample size with Andy Dalton, and the Marvin Lewis era was trademarked with stick to the devils you know, and instead of the ones you don't. And Taylor may be, especially in his first stint as a head coach, he may want to gamble a little bit more and go the other way. Yeah,
and I think there's obviously a big difference between a first-year coach saying this and like the 15-year head coach saying that, I'm not gonna try my luck with a new quarterback. I'm gonna stick with the one I have, because what we know now is that he didn't have that much time left, so he probably didn't want to start fresh over. But and you talk about like the new coach getting his new guy, and look no further than Arizona, who's
right, exactly
liquidate the quarterback that they traded up for 5 spots last year to get a brand new quarterback, the one that he wants with the first overall pick. So obviously the dynamics between the Arizona front office and the Bengals could not be any more different in that case. But it makes sense because Taylor is new here and he does want to work well with the Bengals front office and what they do well, but also he wants to win with his guys and he wants to do things his own way. And if he finds the guy that can run his offense better than Andy Dalton, I wouldn't be surprised if he stands up on the table and argues for him, because ultimately his regime is going to be defined by a quarterback who's not Andy Dalton, because I think at this point we realize that he's just not enough to move on further than where they went in years past with him, even under a new head coach, because like you're right, he's 8-9 years into the league, and at this point he is who he is, and maybe he can maintain solid production in the regular season, but it's going to take just an otherworldly performance on a stage that he's never shown. And that's something that Zach Taylor might not be betting on, at least beyond 2020. It's fine it's fine and fair to give him a shot in 2019, to give him the best possible chance to win with a roster and a new offense. And I think that's fine for him to express confidence in that. But I think it's also important to see that, I like you, Andy, but like I'm not Marvin Lewis, and if I see my guy, I'm going to go get my guy, and I have no confidence. I have no doubt that Andy's going to do his best to kind of mentor him along the way as well. And like you said, if a quarterback isn't taken with the first 3 or 4 picks, I'll be more shocked than not.
I think these non-committals, I guess, or especially from the owner, a guy who is so steady in, keeping some of these figurehead type of players, figurehead type of coaches. The fact that he said we're going to let 2019 play out, that to me, that speaks volumes. I don't want to, like I said, I'm not sitting here saying Andy Dalton's not going to start this year. I'm not sitting here saying
no, he's definitely starting. And
right.
They're not going to try to tank, obviously.
Right. And I've kind of started saying early when the Taylor hire happened, I wonder if he wants to put his stamp on things, and in doing so, it would be by a quarterback. He was a quarterback himself. He coached quarterbacks. It just makes sense to me. But gut feeling for you, just to kind of before we move on, do you do you see the Bengals using that top pick of theirs based on these comments? Do you see that happening at quarterback?
I think they're in a good spot where they're not going to force themselves into it, because I think it's clear that Kyler's going 1. And then beyond Kyler, you have Haskins, who's probably the consensus 2. Then you have Drew Lock and Daniel Jones, 2 guys that me personally would not poke with a 50-foot-yard stick in the first round. So I think they're in a good spot to see what happens with Haskins. I think if he falls beyond the top 6, which probably isn't going to happen, they're in a good spot to move up. But just based off how they normally operate, what the state of the roster is, because they kind of pigeonhole themselves into targeting either a linebacker or a defensive lineman with that first round pick in a good class for both positions. So I think they're pretty focused on those 2 positions with that pick. But if Haskins does fall to like 8, 9, or 10, and they have him graded high, and they're now considering a quarterback, it's got to be considered as a legitimate possibility. I won't believe they trade up for him until it actually happens. But if Haskins is available there, it's hard for me to say that they won't do it, because in years past, you could definitively say that they won't do it because Marvin Lewis is still here. The comments were clear, but this is Zach Taylor, and the option is on the table. Now, I don't think Haskins will fall all the way down there, and I don't think that they'll try to talk themselves into a Daniel Jones in the first round. I think they'll just go with the best player at another position of need. But yeah, like I think there is a scenario that does exist. It's just not a likely one.
Yeah, and the Rosen thing's the wild card, because there was a report, I think it was by Joel Klatt of Fox Sports, that said the Giants were one of the teams supposedly really interested in Josh Rosen, and if they were to give up, a second round pick or whatever, that would they're one of the teams that has constantly mocked Dwayne Haskins in the draft or in mock drafts. So, then all of a sudden you take a team out of the equation in that top 10 that doesn't need a quarterback because they have moved Rosen. Maybe a trade falls out of favor with the Giants, and then Rosen becomes an option for the Bengals, and then that way they're only using a second round or third round pick as capital. But yeah, I mean, the Rosen thing to me is a wild card type of situation on how this thing plays out.
And I wish the Bengals were a legitimate part of that wild card conversation, because I think right now it's just the Chargers and the Patriots who are like legitimate things. And like people are talking about the Giants should like offer one of their first round picks, and in theory that would be smart, because most people think that Rosen's worth it. But right now his market's like a third, and like only the Chargers and I guess the Patriots are considering a second. So if you're the Giants, you're thinking, why would I offer a first when I can offer like a third or a second? And honestly, like the Bengals and the Dolphins and a plethora of other teams should be slamming the Cardinals' phones for that third or second round pick, because even if you do have confidence in the guy like Andy Dalton for 1 year, to have that guy, because if you're considering taking a quarterback like a Will Grier or a Tyree Jackson like the third or second round, and then you have a chance to use that pick on Rosen, there's just no reason why that plan wouldn't be better than the other one.
Yeah, some comments in the live YouTube chat. Jason Von Stein says they said the same thing about Jamarcus Russell. Robert Obrecht says Daniel Jones, Duke, second round. Zachary Stemple says Jones is a check down Charlie. I like that. Ken Dipple says look up Bart Williams, Grand Valley State. I don't know if you know
Fake name.
What's that?
Bart Williams cannot be a real name.
What?
He's a professor. All right.
Bart Williams. So yeah, interesting stuff ahead for the quarterback position, and we're closing in on the draft, and so it's going to be talked about more and more, and these comments definitely fuel that. Moving on, John. Let's bring a little levity to the show, shall we?
Perfect.
And this is probably going to be sloppy as hell, but whatever. Let's have some fun with it.
It's my only bracket.
Yeah, same with me. And you'll probably be able to tell because this is put together with bubblegum and Band-Aids. And truth be told, we had a different idea planned as of yesterday for the show, and then we kind of said, the Sweet 16 is coming up, so let's create a little Bengals, and the NFL draft is coming up, so let's create a little Bengals draft bracket 16, and a Sweet 16 draft bracket. Obviously, I think we know who's going to win. In terms of, it's kind of like the Duke, North Carolina as they enter the tournament type of thing. To be honest, I didn't seed these people, but what I did do is I placed them, and there are a number of factors. So let's lay out some parameters here. There are a number of factors in this, and how I kind of grouped them was by region and by region of their college that they went to. Now, there's a little bit of fudging there based on who the players are and geographics, but I think you kind of get the gist of it. There's also, I mean, most of these guys are high picks, but you also have to take into account longevity with the team, Pro Bowls. You also have to take into account where they were drafted, all of that good stuff. Unfortunately, there are a couple of players that probably should or could be on this list that are not because of the geographic situation and all of that. You'll probably recognize who those might be as we go through these names, but let's start this off until we whittle it down. Where do you want to start, John? The South, the West, the North, or the East?
Never eat soggy waffles, Anthony. Start with the North.
Start with the North? Okay.
Start with the North.
All right. So we have Ken Anderson versus Lamar Parrish. And by the way, there's obviously like no home court, whatever here. I mean, so we can't like do that stuff.
Yeah. Come on.
Can we just have a little fun with it? That's what I'm doing.
Yeah. Like what's the spread here? Is like favored like 5.5.
God. Yeah. I know. Yeah. Well, I guess there is a home. You could say Anderson has the advantage because he's a quarterback and more people know him. I guess, but for those who don't know, Lamar Parrish had 6 Pro Bowls with the Bengals as a defensive back, was an excellent player, and then was traded to the Redskins. One of the best players in their history. Obviously, Ken Anderson, the same, former NFL MVP. Who do you got in that one? I
mean, I just learned like kind of recently. I was educated about how good Parrish was because I always oh God, what was his name? The other safety from the '88 Super Bowl team.
Fulcher.
Yeah, I was always like a big Fulcher stan because he ran like a football camp for some of my friends, and he was always a cool dude, and I always knew how good he was, but I never knew how good Lamar Parrish was. He was just as good, if not better, but even still, like Ken Anderson should be in the Hall of Fame, and Lamar Parrish probably shouldn't be, so this is easily Ken.
Okay. Let's go, we'll save East, since we just kind of did a quarterback there and we just did North. Let's do East, another East bracket. I'm gonna take notes here. So I think we both are in agreement. Ken Anderson wins that one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let's do the East bracket. Now this is where it got a little. We kind of ran out of South people, South bracket people. So this is technically Southeast guys, but James Brooks and Chris Collinsworth. Chris Collinsworth made, I believe, 3 Pro Bowls with the Bengals, former first-round pick, and James Brooks was not drafted by the Bengals. I think he was a former second-round pick, but made 4 Pro Bowls with the Bengals and was one of the best trades they have ever made. James Brooks went to Auburn. Chris Collinsworth went to Florida. So that's where we kind of got creative with the East bracket there. But who do you have in that one?
The other South matchup looks more star-powered, but this one is a little more old school, a little out of my comfort zone here. But I'll go with James Brooks because Gio Bernard has always been like that next reincarnation of James Brooks, and I'm a big Barry Sanders stan. He's always that's just my kind of running back, that kind of make you miss kind of guy. Obviously, very valuable during that '88 season, both in the run game and pass game. Obviously, Collinsworth owns PFF and has his own little slide intro into Sunday Night Football, but I think Brooks is more underrated. It's kind of like that 5-12 matchup that I would pick the 12, and I think that qualifies as Brooks here.
I'm in agreement. And by the way, for those of you tuning in live, we are if we do, I think we're going to agree on a lot of these, but if we don't, we're going to rely on some of the live listeners in the YouTube for the tiebreaker. If we have a standstill, we've already got a couple of people saying Ken Anderson was the winner there. And then Optic Blasted, this last one was a tough one, I believe. But I think we're going to go with Brooks on that one. So Collinsworth is eliminated and Lamar Parrish is eliminated. Let's jump to the other side. We'll leave it one more east and one more north in just a second. This side is where a lot of the harder matchups are, in my opinion. But I think that we'll start with an easy one, which is from the West bracket: Anthony Munoz versus Bob Trumpy. Now, I think there's no contest here, and obviously Anthony Munoz is the favorite to win this bracket, but I don't think we can sneeze at what Bob Trumpy's career was. He was a 4-time Pro Bowler with the Bengals, really revolutionized the tight end position. But that being said, that's a tough bracket for Trumpy.
All right. In Trumpy's case, because he was the Bengals radio guy for many years, right?
Yes, he was. Yeah.
Would you consider him better at that job than Anthony Munoz was at preseason broadcaster?
Sure.
All right, so I think that has to weigh in some way, because this is the 1 versus 16, and we're not trying to make Munoz the Virginia to Trumpy's UMBC here, but all right, yeah, fine, Munoz. I tried, Trumpy. I tried.
By the way, shameless plug of the show, we also have a couple of guys from this bracket who have been on our program, so including Mr. Munoz, and so we better make sure he advances far, because if we ever want him back, we'll have to tell him about this. By the way, if he does win this bracket, we'll have to tell him about it next time we have him on. So let's go with this. This one's tough for me. Very, very difficult for me. We may need to rely on somebody, some chat room folks for this. In the West bracket, Corey Dillon versus Chad Johnson.
Oh,
that is a really tough. And here's the thing, okay? And I'll let you go first here, John. Here's the thing: Dillon was a victim of being on some god awful teams.
Yes.
Johnson was. I don't want to say he was a product. He was a main source of why the Bengals were good throughout the 2000s and whatnot. But there were teams and a coach that were much more improved than pretty much whatever Dillon had. And then Dillon went on beyond the Bengals and had a couple of great seasons with the Patriots, won a Super Bowl with them. So this is where I think it's tough. I'm going to let you go first on that one. And the winner of this one's going to face Ken Anderson.
Oh, man, I want to say Dillon for the sake of being a devil's advocate, but Chad Johnson's the GOAT, man. Like, he's the guy who made the Bengals dope, and like Dillon did his own part too with that. And this is almost like a championship in its own, like, because they're so similar in terms of their impact and how not only how good they were, but how like it kind of started a dialogue about the Bengals, even though they weren't a perennial powerhouse at the time, but. If I was a little bit older, I might be more inclined to say Dillon, because I didn't see all of his career when I was a Bengals fan, and at least as a conscious one. I Chad by like a buzzer beater, I would say.
Oh, I like the multi-sport reference there. I like that. I am begrudgingly going to go with you. And by the way, talk about two guys who had very similar ends of their careers with the Bengals, went on to the Patriots and played in a Super Bowl with them. In
terms of Patriots, Dillon was a better Patriot.
He was a better Patriot. This next one's going to be very interesting, because these are probably two of the guys that will always be discussed about the Hall of Fame, but probably never get in. I will begrudgingly go with Chad Johnson. More Pro Bowls. I'm seeing more. I'm inclined maybe personally to go a little more Dillon, just because I remember him doing more with less. But
right.
I'm seeing a lot of Chad. Ken Dipple, DJ says Chad. Zachary Stemple says probably Chad. Robert Obrecht says Dillon. So, yeah, I think we're going to go Chad, and he's going to go to the Final Four against Ken Anderson, and we'll get to that one in just a second. So let's do this one. Let's hop back to the East. Boomer Esiason versus Carl Pickens. To me, I think a lot of people remember Boomer Esiason much more than they do Ken Anderson because of recency and obviously flash. This may be, I guess, on some hands, easy for some. Carl Pickens has the Corey Dillon effect to me because Pickens was the even worse teams than Dillon was on, and really all there was there was Jeff Blake throwing him rainbows. But he was amazing for this team for a stretch of a handful of seasons. Boomer the same though, and Boomer was an NFL MVP. Who do you have in this one?
I forgot honestly where Pickens was drafted. I think had he been drafted well after Boomer, I think that might have given an edge because that's a variable that I haven't really considered until now in terms of draft status and what they got from him. But like a Bengals player who played all of his career in the 90s made 2 Pro Bowls. It's like the most impressive feat in the history of sports, and that was Carl Pickens. I'm a Jeff Blake stan who is like in the NIT of this pool, I guess, along with Carlos Dunlap. But even so, like that offense is dreadful. That team was dreadful, and Pickens still somehow managed to produce at a level that I guess relative to his surrounding talent and his surrounding environment is honestly incredible. And I look at Boomer, who's in my opinion the clear second best quarterback in this franchise's history, and the stuff that he did under under Weiss and stuff. I'm gonna go Pickens because I think there is that impact because Boomer was a part of the greatest Bengals team in the history of the organization. Unfortunately, did not win that Super Bowl. 4 Pro Bowls to his name. Well, obviously, all pro season almost. I believe it was almost an MVP, or maybe it was an MVP season. Pickens 90s dope made that team kind of fun when they did win every once in a while. I'll go Pickens.
I'm gonna go Boomer. So we're gonna go to the YouTube chat. And it's not by a lot. I don't think Boomer gets his due as a football player, just in general, especially with Ken Anderson and him being on the front end, I guess, not even really, of when the Bengals started to turn very bad in the 90s. But there was also a couple of years with Boomer that he basically had like 3 outstanding seasons and then some hit and miss seasons. But I'm going to go with Boomer because I'm seeing more of it in the YouTube chat. I'm sorry, John. Spencer Meyer says Esiason. DJ says Boomer. So there was one for Pickens there as well. So we're gonna go Boomer by a nose. Pickens is eliminated. So let's go. And by the way, this is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast, and we are doing a Sweet 16 of Bengals best draft picks, or I guess Bengals best players, based on region, from where they went to school. North, we have Reggie Williams, who really wasn't ever an outstanding player, but played a lifetime of football with the Bengals, and was always pretty good. And Tim Crumry. And Reggie Williams I believe he went to Dartmouth. And Tim Crumry, you said, went to Wisconsin. I think you told me before we went on the air, just to remind you of that. So who do you have in that one?
10th round pick, 1 All-Pro, 2 Pro Bowls, part of a Super Bowl team. Let's go Crumry.
Yep.
Obviously a fan favorite as well.
Yep. Hard to argue with that. So you have from the West bracket in this Final Four matchup, Anthony Munoz, who went to USC, and then you have him playing in the Final Four against Tim Crumry, who went to Wisconsin. Who's going to win that one? Let's finalize the other 2 Final Four brackets here. We have Boomer barely making it out of the East. And oh boy, this is one of the tougher ones as well. From the South bracket, AJ Green versus Willie Anderson. Reminder, Willie Anderson's been on this program. So
he has, and AJ Green could be on this program.
Yeah, he could be at some point.
That decision, but oh man. Like Green's accolades match what Willie's should be, I guess. I don't have Willie's Pro Bowls in front of me. I can look them up right now.
I think he has 4.
It's 4.
Yeah. 4 or 5.
Right. Four Pro Bowls, 3 All-Pros, which is more than I thought. Should be a Hall of Famer. Part of some bad Bengals teams, obviously started in '96. Half his career was under the Marvin Lewis era. Finished his career with the Ravens. Obviously, Green is just the best player that they have right now, if not for another guy that we're going to mention in a little bit. 2 terrific guys. I love following Willie on Instagram and on Twitter. He kind of gets at it, and he has an attitude of his own. Green's kind of just a whole other personality, but top 10 pick, top 4 pick. I think I have to go Green because that was a pick that, after the lockout, after the Palmer fiasco, they just couldn't miss. And obviously that draft class, you literally could not miss in the top 10 unless you pick Blaine Gabbert. But it was just such a slam dunk pick that ended up being about as good as you could possibly get. And to no disrespect to Willie at all, he's a fantastic player who should have a bust at Canton if he played for a relevant franchise. But I'll just go with Green for that significance about what it did for the franchise.
Gonna go with you, and there's a ton of AJ support in the YouTube chat. And for the sake of time, hard to disagree with anything you said there, but that is a very tough pick there. So you have Green versus Boomer in one of the final 4 brackets, Chad versus Ken Anderson in the other, Munoz versus Crumry. And then James Brooks is going to face off in the final 4 here against these 2 guys. Another very tough one, Geno Atkins versus Andrew Whitworth from the South bracket. Obviously, Atkins went to Georgia, Whitworth went to LSU. I'm
a Georgia stan over LSU, but it's more tough than that, I think, because there's a part of me that wants to go Whit because of how it ended here and just kind of like a sympathy thing. But it was always interesting to me, like with the debate between him and Joe Thomas, is not only the best offensive tackle in the division in the state, but just in the league, and how underappreciated Whitworth was. And for a time, that was kind of what Geno was before he really elevated himself into that upper echelon. And eventually now he was taken over by Aaron Donald. But you're talking about 2 guys who at their peaks were top 2 or 3 at their position. And I think in terms of just the criteria of how we're doing this, I think I'm going to lean towards Geno because it was a 4th round pick. He had kind of more going up against him because at that time there was just only a handful of undersized 3 techniques who really made it big in the NFL, and a couple of them were long retired by then. So he kind of started this new wave of undersized B-gap rushers that ended up making a name for himself. So I'll go Geno for those reasons.
I will begrudgingly join you. There's everything in the world telling me Whitworth, including, you should see the YouTube chat. This is like split right down the middle. I'll go Atkins too, and I think more because of the value aspect, the 4th round pick, more Pro Bowls. I will say what's making me lean somewhat to Whit is just the fact that he's still doing it at such an older age and still playing at a very high level. But I will begrudgingly go Atkins there. So that finalizes the 4. Let's get through these pretty quickly before we get some listener questions and get out of here. AJ Green versus Boomer in the final 4 there.
I'll go with Green.
Or Elite 8, I guess. Wow. I guess we're Elite 8. We're not even final 4. Green? Yeah.
I'll go Green.
I'm with you there. Chad versus Ken Anderson.
It's like the same thing. It's
I know.
Elite receiver versus top 2 quarterback. All the logic is telling me Ken, so I'll go Chad because that's kind of how I do my brackets at home.
I'm with you, Chad. And guess what that sets up a matchup for? We'll talk about that in a second. Atkins versus Brooks. I think we both are going to say Atkins on that one.
Yep.
And then, wow, this is quite the final 4. Munoz versus Crumry. I think we know where we're going with that one, correct?
Sharpie.
Yeah. Okay. So final 4. Green versus Chad.
You're going to make me answer this?
This is Duke, North Carolina, I guess, here in a way.
There's no right answer. I'm just going to make me upset about the guy I left out. I don't know, man, because I think Green is the more naturally talented player, but I think Chad's technique and craft is so ungodly underappreciated, and his overall skill set was just legendary in its own right. And I think that Chad working with Carson Palmer gave him more of an advantage than Green working with Andy Dalton. And I think the consistency that Green has shown, despite a few durability issues, gives him another edge as well. I think for all this, there's all those factors, and then there's like Chad being obviously the culture aspect of just being a Bengals fan and what made that so amazing too. It's like it's just it's an unstoppable force meaning an unmovable object.
Yeah,
and
you're talking yourself in and out of the answer.
Exactly. just put Green. Just put Green and get it over with.
Yep, that's who I got. So AJ Green is in the championship. Now we know who's going to win this, I think, but this is still a hell of a matchup: Atkins versus Anthony Munoz.
Dino.
I mean Munoz for me, but. I mean, that's still not something to sneeze at. Not a matchup to sneeze at, right?
Not at all.
Okay. All right. So Munoz moves on, and then you got Green versus Munoz. I think we know Munoz is going to win. That's what we said at the entire onset, right? Unless you got AJ Green being a better player than Anthony Munoz. Do you?
I unfortunately do not.
No. But, hey, the bracket kind of worked out in a way that a lot of people would say. Final four was Green versus Chad. And then you had Atkins versus Munoz. Munoz wins it all. Now, I see some people talking about some other people, some other players we omitted in here. Yes, there were some others. Unfortunately, we couldn't get because we went Sweet 16. If we were doing the 32, by the way, that'd be like a whole episode. So we left off, obviously, a great player, David Fulcher, Isaac Curtis. Tommy Casanova was a guy we kicked around as well. There are some other offensive linemen. Max Montoya was another guy I thought about. You can even go Bob Johnson, the first guy I ever picked by the team. There are a lot of different guys.
If we just went the whole South bracket, it would have been fun.
Yeah, gosh, we should have. Gosh, I mean, the South matchups were awesome. But, even though this team only has one true Bengals player in the Hall of Fame as we currently sit here, I mean, you heard the list of all the players. There is an argument to be had for quite a few of these players, especially when Atkins and Green hang it up. There's going to be some arguments to be had on a lot of these guys. So it's fun reminiscing. We appreciate you guys playing along, and we know it went a little long, but hey, the Sweet 16's coming up. We thought we'd do a Bengals Sweet 16. We appreciate there was a lot of interaction in the live chat as to their votes, and there were they helped with a couple of tiebreakers there, so we appreciate that. Munoz is he's just going to win these things until, I don't know, the team ends up getting a guy who makes like 15 Pro Bowls in his career. We knew going in he'd probably win, but we did have some interesting matchups along the way. God, that Chad Johnson one, that was a tough one.
That still pains me.
Yeah, I know. This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. We're going to get to a couple of listener questions here, so leave them in the live YouTube chat. Hit us up on the Orange and Black Insider line, 949-542-6241. We'll also be scouring a couple of other areas on CincyJungle.com and at Bengals OBI on Twitter. So we're going to take some listener questions before we get out of here. So hit us up. But you can get this show in the meantime. If you're not with us live, you can get this show on iTunes, on Stitcher, on Google Play, on Spotify. You can also get it on the Megaphone platform as well as on YouTube and CincyJungle.com. So please hit us up with some questions you have before we get out of here. There was some talk early on in the live YouTube chat, and I think this is worth discussing because I saw more chatter of this on Twitter earlier this week because of so many mock drafts, and you get inundated with mock drafts at times. But there's the situation of what if the Devons aren't there? I see Ken Dipple talked about it early in the show. I see Alex Gonzalez mentioned it as well. Jason Von Stein also said, I'd love to trade out of the first and get another this year. If those two guys are gone, and granted, it depends on, quarterback availability and all that stuff like we talked about. But if those two guys are gone, because I think those are the two guys we sit here today and we say, those are the two guys that are very ready to play, immediate impact player at the position that is needed the most. Sidebar, on our show post that we put up on Cincy Jungle last week, we had a vote as to what position still needs the most help. And this was before the Darqueze Dennard signing, and linebacker won by an absolute landslide. So I guess the question is, if the Devons are gone, what do the Bengals do? Is it tackle or bust? Is it quarterback or bust? Or is it move back, collect more picks, and try and build the other areas of the team?
This is why these discussions are always so great, because like the list of guys who could potentially be gone for the team picking 11th overall spot, it reaches like 20. And you're like, guys, if both linebackers are gone and both quarterbacks are gone, that's 4 guys gone. And there's 7 other guys that need to be picked. And you're talking about a class that's full of elite defensive line talent. If both Devons are gone, both quarterbacks are gone, a guy like Ed Oliver could be there. A guy like Brian Burns, the edge rusher from Florida State, could be there. You're going to get a guy who should be a clear top 10 player available at 11th overall. And I don't even think most people have Devin Bush as at the same level of grade as like a Devin White, who I think is rumored to go now no further than like 5th overall to the Buccaneers. He's probably going to go in the top 5. So if he's gone, then Bush is obviously the best linebacker available. Maybe like a couple weeks ago before the combine, he wasn't projected to be a high first-round pick, but that combine obviously elevated his stock tremendously. So if he's somehow gone, that gives me great confidence that a very good player at another position of need, either defensive end or defensive tackle, is going to be there available for the Bengals to pick and improve the team, because that's all that matters. If their pass rush improves at a greater rate, even if they don't get a first-round linebacker, that still improves the defense overall, and they can still find a quality linebacker to put behind him there, which I think is all that matters. You kind of just had to go with the flow with the draft, because the draft is stupid, and stupid things can happen, and both Devons being gone in the first 10 picks would be kind of a stupid thing to think about just in the pre-draft, but it's just one of those things that just kind of happens, and there's going to be 2 or 3 quarterbacks that are going to get picked, so it just leads to another great player at a position of need to be available there. So it's something to worry about, but not something to be too concerned about.
Yeah, we worry about this a lot, and for some reason we always say, "Oh, the guy's not going to be there. The guy's not going to be there," and someone
and then he's there, and then they don't take him.
Right, yeah. David DeCastro, hi, how are you? So yeah, I mean, someone's going to be there, like you said. If the Devons aren't there, an Ed Oliver will be there, and that would make a lot of people happy. If all 3 of those guys are gone, that means a quarterback will be there. Or one of the elite offensive linemen in this draft. So, I mean, someone's going to be there where you're going to be like, okay, there's value there. Right. I don't think there's going to be a massive reach, which is what the Bengals used to do in the pre-Marvin Lewis era. We do have a call on the line. I believe it's from our good friend Terrell. Terrell, how are you?
How you doing? Doing pretty good.
Yeah, it actually feels like it's been a while since we've talked to you, bud.
Yeah, and I gotta say, Cincinnati finally feeling like spring a little bit.
Yeah, it was like 60 today.
I just really wanted to just say that I'm just kind of getting pissed off because all this week, all I've been hearing is about the Browns or the Steelers. The Browns or the Steelers. I mean, they not even mentioning Ravens or the Bengals. Like, it's like we not even the topic. It's like I guess they just think that Andy Dalton, it is what it is, and Lamar Jackson can't throw. And then the thing that was aggravating me was they was going position by position, and the way they thinking James Conner is like one of the basically Le'Veon Bell, and I'm thinking like, shit, we still got Joe Mixon and stuff, and it was irritating me about the everybody just so blown over about the Browns, and they even still thinking about the Steelers. And also, I just think real quick, I just think that John Miller has got to be the starting right tackle or long right side with the right tackle with Bobby Hart. And I think I really hope dang, I forgot his name. I really hope this the guy that started last year, center. But I really hope that Price do fight for that either a center or a guard spot, and we get maybe the tackle from Kansas State.
Oh, Risner, yeah. Well, Terrell, but the first question, we're going to address both of these, but your first question was probably one of the best ones you've submitted on this show because it is something I'm fired up about. So appreciate you calling in, my friend, and we'll talk to you soon. The first one, John, is something that I'm kind of fired up about because Twitter every day. I mean, I saw this thing today where it was the Muppets singing about Baker Mayfield and he's Cookie Monster's favorite. I'm sitting here going, dude, this is ridiculous. This is a team. We briefly talked about it last week, I think, with Cody, but this is a team that won 7 games last year, 7 games, and they have made the playoffs once since 1999. This is a team that has probably, I mean, aside from its early foundations, has been as cursed or more than the Cincinnati Bengals in terms of choking away big games. Look, there's a lot of talent amassed on that team. There is a lot for that team to be excited about because of the drought that they've experienced. But I mean, the media hype train is all over it. And God, if you're a Browns fan, God forbid Baker Mayfield ends up having a sophomore slump or people figure him out or something, because that is going to be a gigantic fall from grace. Here's the other thing, because I do want to get your take on that, John. But the other thing is, I like what Terrell said about matching up position players by position players. You go, obviously, OBJ, Jarvis Landry, Antonio Callaway, there's a lot of talent there. Well, hey, Tyler Boyd just came off of a 1,000-yard season. A.J. Green is going to flirt with the Hall of Fame by the time he's done. And if John Ross takes somehow a big stride this next year, that's not a bad trio. You have Tyler Eifert. You've got some talent. You've got Joe Mixon. You've got Giovanni Bernard. I mean, there are, when you kind of look at the exciting players, you go, well, the Bengals have a lot of talent. My problem is, it's what I said earlier, the ifs. If everybody stays healthy, if John Ross takes the leap, if the coaching staff and their inexperience is far wiser beyond their years, that's where I worry in terms of the Bengals in comparison to maybe the Browns. By the way, Freddie Kitchens is a first-time head coach himself in the NFL. So your thoughts on all of that? I thought that was a good question by Terrell.
You mentioned the Browns and the Steelers. So the Steelers are the perennial team. Even if they lose Antonio Brown, they're always going to be competitive because they have a good coach in Tomlin. They have a good quarterback in Roethlisberger. They're always going to have the cloud around this time of the year, even if they don't do much, because they rarely do anything in free agency. The Browns have done everything right since the end of the season. They hired the right head coach in Freddie Kitchens. They've surrounded Baker Mayfield with a lot of good talent on the offensive side of the ball. They made improvements in other areas beyond just free agency in terms of trade. So they've done everything right. And I don't think it's surprising that the media would credit them for doing the things correctly, because if there's ever a time to like the Browns, it's before they end up kicking off week 1, because you don't know what they're going to do beyond that. But I think it's fair to praise what the Browns have done. Obviously, they have to prove it to validate all this going on. But when you look at the Bengals, it's more so of the same old, besides hiring all the head coaches. But in terms of just their overall team building process, nothing really major has happened compared to trading for OBJ and trading away Kevin Zeitler for Olivier Vernon. And you look at the Ravens, who have done, more so the same with their overall free agency approach. So I'm not really shocked about it at all. It's popular to like the Browns right now, and a lot of the media is capitalizing off of that. And just looking at what they did towards the end of that season when Kitchens took over, what the pieces they have now, what they retained, and what they brought in, it's easy to see that success keep building. But again, they have to prove it. But it's just the Muppets having fun, it's not too much for me personally to be upset about, because they do have a good team and they are primed to do something with it. They just got to do it.
Cookie Monster betrayed me.
His name is Baker, Anthony. He bakes cookies.
I know. But I almost liken them to what the Kansas City Chiefs were last year, right? I mean, they've got the exciting quarterback who's now entering his second year with Not a full season of starting, but the sky seems the limit there. They've got talent at the wide receiver position. They've got talent at the running back position. And by the way, have you noticed what's happened with the Kansas City Chiefs from late last year into this offseason? Kareem Hunt arrested. You've got issues with Tyreek Hill once again surfacing. Who knows what's going to happen there? They've lost Dee Ford. They don't seem poised to re-sign Justin Houston. That team is getting kind of fleeced.
They lost Houston.
What?
They lost Houston.
You're right.
Yeah.
So they got rid of him. So now you look at the Browns. I don't want to say these are bad guys on this team or whatever, but there is a powder keg type of situation here. Now, could it be an AFC championship team? Could it be a Super Bowl bound team with the talent they have? Yes. But Baker Mayfield was arrested in college. You've got Antonio Callaway with a myriad of issues himself. Kareem Hunt, I mentioned, who they picked up, is now going to be suspended for, I think, 8 games, and he has his issue. OBJ, not really the same issues, but was known sort of as a locker room issue, I guess. Who knows if he's not getting the ball enough, what's going to happen there? My point is, this has the ability to do this, or this has, especially with the buildup, it has the ability to completely implode. Maybe not even in 2019, but maybe we look at 2020, we look at 2021, especially inexperienced head coach. How do you manage all the egos? Am I off base with that?
It's the John Dorsey factor, because a lot of those players that you mentioned, they're brought in by the Chiefs from Dorsey when he was there. Then he went to Cleveland, drafted Mayfield, who I don't think was a bad person. I think he got caught in a bad situation there.
Right.
They did draft Callaway, who had a myriad of issues. I don't think OBJ is necessarily a bad person, but there is, I guess, some weight to that. But Dorsey doesn't really care. And like he'll come off saying, like, I like my guys, but in reality, I think he's just purely just a football guy who doesn't really take stock into anything else in regards to off the field stuff. But yeah, when you put all those guys into that room, it really comes down to, do they have the leadership at the most important spots to make it all work together? And that's what they're counting on Baker to be. And I think Baker has the capability of being that leader. I don't think he's just a clone of Johnny Manziel. And I think Kitchens is a guy that can work well with him as well. So as long as they have some type of mission, some type of singular mindset, some type of goal that and all the leaders can kind of cohesively go together, they can build something. And I think, from your point, how much of a variance this season can go from, that's like perfect eye candy for like the media to talk about as well.
Yep. It's going to be very interesting in this division, watching this division this year in terms of new coaches, new talent, guys coming back to teams, the Steelers losing guys and who they replace them with, all of that. We're going to get out of here, though. We're running a tiny bit long, even though we started a little late, but appreciate all the questions, the interactions, the comments in the live YouTube chat and various other ways. We appreciate the call there from Terrell. Any final thoughts before we get out of here, John?
I did miss you guys. I'm sorry I missed last week, but I didn't have the greatest start of this week, mainly because I was hungover for most of them. But I'm glad to be back. I'm glad for the interaction on the show again. Let's get my juices pumping. I can't wait for next week.
There's nothing worse than that hangover that is a 2-dayer.
It was a 4-day for me.
Woo! That's where you gotta, and then you try and do the hair of the dog, and then it just keeps keeps coming back. But good to have you back. Glad you went away for a little bit and had some fun, man. That's good times. I don't really have a final thought other than this has been a jam-packed episode with a lot of fun stuff, a lot of good topics, and it's going to be very. We've got a lot of stuff coming up for the draft for this program, both in terms of being involved in the SB Nation mock draft. So keep that in mind with our. That's primarily going to be on our audio feed. So check that out and make sure that you download that stuff, because both John and I think you're going to be involved, buddy. We're going to be involved in the SB Nation mock draft, and then as the draft happens, we're going to figure out a game plan on how to do that. We're hoping to bring in some guests and talk to some people in terms of reactions and everything that the Bengals do in a few weeks with the NFL draft. So keep it to our program and keep it to CincyJungle.com with all of the news updates and all that. This has been the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. As I mentioned before, you can get this show on iTunes, on Stitcher, on Google Play, on Spotify, on Megaphone. You can also get it on YouTube and CincyJungle.com. We appreciate all the feedback. We appreciate the live listeners, and we appreciate all of you who download the show after the fact. Try and join us live sometime, and tell a fellow Bengals fan about our program. We love interacting with you guys. Appreciate it. See you next episode.